The following program is a color feature presentation on the HSM Television Network.
Truly one of Georgia's most outstanding football players was All-American defensive back Jake Scott. On September 14, 1968, in Knoxville, Tennessee, Scott had a tremendous day. With Tennessee in the lead and threatening in the second half, Scott picks off a pass on a brilliant one-hand interception to stop the drive. And later in the game, Scott receives a Tennessee punt at the Georgia 11. He eludes tacklers, picks up blockers, weaves his way upfield, and ironically even jumps over one of his teammates' helmets to score on an 89-yard touchdown. Scott's effort preserves Georgia's undefeated championship season, and that's another great moment in Georgia football history.
From the men who brought you basically a sports show, if your football fix wasn't met on Thursday night, it's time for an additional slice. This is basically a football show right now. Let's go!
Kicked by Hartley. And it's good! It's good! The Saints are on their way to the Super Bowl.
Hopping once, now throwing long down the left side. Slaughter has it. He's going in for a touchdown! The Falcons won the game!
Gordon bumps again to the sideline. Batted up.
Oh, God! Stokely down the sideline. Can they catch him? Stokely! Wow! Touchdown! Denver! Unbelievable!
Welcome in to basically a football show, Season 2, Episode 13?
13 it is.
Lucky number 13. I'm Zach. You just heard Greg. And Greg, definitely some surprising results all over the world of football, whether it's college or pro. Some shakeups, some disappointments, some just weirdness going on.
Absolutely some weirdness going on, especially in the NFL, especially in college football, especially everywhere, really.
Yeah,
we've had some teams that fell off. We've had some teams that are in it that we didn't think would be, and so on, and here we are.
Well, I mean, last year we talked about how up and down the NFL season was. We didn't know what was going on, like, the whole season. And then this year we thought we had a better grip on it. But as the season's progressed, it's gotten into the weird season territory again.
Yeah.
As slowly but surely, every NFL season kind of does this. But now it's definitely in the thick of it with some of these games, some of these results. I don't understand some of it.
If I'm an NFL team, the last team I want to be is the team that's the quote-unquote hot team. Because that's just not working out well for anybody at this point, which really makes me nervous about my Green Bay Packers. But, yeah, it's been we go back to, say, the first month of the season. There are teams that we thought were done that are now in the thick of it. We thought teams that were in the thick of it are now out of it. And we thought last year was nutty. I think this year's even nuttier than last year because I really have no idea who is what in the NFL this year. I think there's 6 teams that are more than capable of winning the Super Bowl right now. Yeah,
very true. But if you had to label 2 of the quote-unquote hot teams right now, they would both be in the AFC East. And let's start with one of them on Thursday night. As the Miami Dolphins, they won a home game again, Greg.
Yeah.
They got a big win on Thursday night over the Bills, 22-9. Ryan Tannehill, 26 of 34, 240, 2 touchdowns. Tannehill's kind of coming into his own and leading these Dolphins to a 6-4 record.
He's not doing too bad, and this team is one of the ones I just talked about. We thought back in the first month that we had all overestimated the Dolphins. They weren't going to be as good as we thought they were going to be, and here they are right in the thick of it again, playing pretty good football.
Playing pretty good football, just alone in second place there in the AFC East. And if the season were to end today, they would not be a wild card. They would be just on the outside looking in, because Pittsburgh is 7-4, and they have a game in hand, obviously, on the 6-4 team. But they'd be right in the mix of it in the AFC North, which is I'm pulling up the standings. I hate looking at that division too.
There's
2 divisions I hate. It's the AFC North because of how competitive it is, I guess, if you want to use a positive term, and then the NFC South with just how awful that one is, but we can get to that in a second.
Real quick, though, on the AFC North, has there ever been a division where every team is over 500 that has had such little respect as this division does?
Well, because
I get
each other up.
I know, I get it, but it's just weird that every one of these teams has a pretty good record. But I don't think we think any of them are a serious Super Bowl contender.
No, well, what that division does is they do the thing where they'll win 2 in a row and you get behind them, and then they lose one, and then they win 2 in a row and then they lose one, and so it's this constant like up and down jockeying for position. That's just I really don't get it. Like, well, here let's go to the AFC North. And on Sunday, and your Cleveland Browns, we said, oh my God, the Cleveland Browns are in first place. Now they're going to host the Texans with Ryan Mallett making his first start. This should have been an easy game for the Browns. Mm-hmm. Except what do the Browns do with easy games this year? Well, they drop them. And Ryan Mallett throws for 221, 2 touchdowns. One of those touchdowns to J.J. freaking Watt.
And this wasn't a Mike Vrabel wide open in the end zone type of thing. This was a catch. I mean, that dude made a play on that touchdown.
Oh, yeah. And the Browns go down 23-7 at home with a chance to really kind of solidify themselves on top of that division. And now they're back with the rest of the muck.
They're not a good team. That of all the teams in the NFL right now, the team with the record that is the biggest mirage, I believe, is the Cleveland Browns. They've gotten They had a couple of nice wins. They beat Pittsburgh in a nice blowout win. They beat Cincinnati in a blowout win. But I'll use this. So, the St. Louis Rams have beaten the Broncos, the 49ers, and the Seahawks this year, but they're still not what anybody would think is a good team. These Browns, until they can figure out a way, I don't know what it is, but when they play a team that they should beat, their offense doesn't show up. The defense kind of gets a little spotty, and they lose. And I don't even know what to make of them, but that 6-4 is the biggest mirage in the NFL right now.
Yeah, the Browns go from first to last. That's the other thing about this division. They were in first place last week. And then they lose one game, and all of a sudden they're at the bottom of the pecking order when it comes to tiebreakers and stuff.
But still in the playoff hunt, oddly enough.
Still right there in the playoff hunt, just like everybody else. But yeah, we'll go to the other North, the Norris, and the Bears. They won a home game.
Oh boy.
They beat the Vikings 21-13. Congratulations, guys! You've equaled the Blackhawks win total in Soldier Field. Jay Cutler, 330, 3 TDs. There were a lot of reports coming out of that locker room just of how dysfunctional that whole thing was. And, it's nice to see them get a win against the Bears, who, or the Vikings, who were better but not great.
Well, here's the thing, okay? You've got the Bears that finally get a win, and you've got the Vikings who have shown signs this year. Now, if you're completely a fan coming into the NFL with no favorite team, you want to pick the one with the best future, I got to go with the Vikings. I think the Bears, wow, what a mess that team is. And Mark Trestman, I saw this guy run the Cleveland Browns offense all the way back when Bernie Kosar was still the quarterback, and he took what was a pretty good high-scoring offense and ran it right into the ground. This Bears team, with the offensive talent they have and with the mercurial Jay Cutler, should be better than this on offense. I'm not saying that they should be a better record, but man, oh man, they can't score points. They're a disaster. And this is a team I thought was going to be a playoff team this year, and they are just god awful.
No, they have all the talent in the world. They're just dysfunctional. They just don't work for whatever reason. And that happens plenty of times in any sport you look at. You're kind of scratch your head and wonder why. But yeah, for all intents and purposes, the Bears are irrelevant. The Vikings are irrelevant. Vikings news though. Adrian Peterson has been confirmed to be suspended through the rest of this season. So
probably the right move by the NFL. I got to think if all the other stuff hadn't happened before this, he probably doesn't get suspended for the rest of the year. But what we're going to see for a long time with the NFL now is they're going to err heavily on the side of caution.
Yeah, and really any sports league, because
right.
We talked about it on the sports show with what the NHL has done since the NFL's laid down their hammer. But yeah, it's the right move. There's no reason to bring him back. The Vikings are bad, and all it would be was just bad publicity. Give it the space of an entire offseason.
Sure.
And let him come back, in the mini camp or whatever. And then you can deal with it then, and then you go through the whole offseason, and then you come back next season, and it's like it never happened in some people's eyes.
What Adrian Peterson should do right now, if he's smart, is he should go out and start the comeback trail on the PR path with, I made a mistake, become an advocate for child abuse, or not for child abuse, that sounds terrible.
Well,
an advocate.
I think he's already doing that.
Yeah, he's already being an advocate for child, but be an advocate for the child abuse cause, the prevention of it and all that. Really rehabilitate his image, and by the time he shows up at training camp next August, it's all forgotten. And he's pulled a Michael Vick, and there's not a thing in the world wrong with that. If he's truly sincere about it, that's great, because that's what you want to see happen with people. You don't want you don't want to let one mistake, and it was a bad mistake, no doubt about it, but you don't want to let one bad mistake ruin a guy for the rest of his life. That's just not fair. So that's what he should do. Now we'll see what he does. It's a different. What he should and what he will do are completely different at this point.
Yeah. We'll stay with northern teams. I probably should have done this after we talked about the Browns, but the Cincinnati Bengals, they go in to New Orleans, and now the Saints lose 2 straight home games.
Yeah.
So the Bengals, 6-3-1, back on top of the division with a 27-10 win, and the Saints are now in a tie for first place in the NFC South with the goddamn Falcons. This was the Saints' calling card. They were going to win all their home games, and now they've lost 2 of them.
Yeah, except they're not going. You know what? This Saints team's just not good. It's just as simple as that. It's not a matter of a bad break here and there. They're not even getting the wins at home now, which tells me that there's something needs to be fixed there. And the Falcons, last week on this very show, I said the Falcons are done. It's over. Forget it. You're not going to make the playoffs. Except guess what? You might make the playoffs this week.
And the Falcons actually have the tiebreaker over the Saints right now.
Not only that, but I think that in a division that's playing a lot of bad football, the Falcons are playing the best bad football of those 4 teams. Yeah, I like their chances the best in that division, which is insane.
Well, the Falcons, they held off the Panthers, the 3-7-1 Panthers, who are still in the playoff hunt because of the stupid division.
Oh my God!
The Falcons won 19-17 to take the division lead. Okay, so the Falcons are 4-6. The Saints are 4-6. The Saints have actually lost their home games. The Falcons are 2-2 at home. And the Saints are 3-2. Is there any way that this division is won with a 500 or better record? There's no way either of those teams get to 8-8.
You know what? I'd have to look at the Falcons' schedule, but they honestly, I think their last 2 wins have come on the road, which is a place where we thought that they would have more trouble winning on the road than New Orleans would.
Well, they've hold their horses there, Craig. They won on the road at Tampa and at Carolina. Let's pump the brakes for a second.
Well, exactly. But the point being is that, and I'm not about to make a big speech about how the Falcons are on their way back and all that.
Well, here's the Falcons' schedule. Here's the Falcons' schedule before you go on your thing. They host Cleveland this weekend.
That should be a win.
You think so?
I absolutely do, yeah.
Then they host the Cardinals.
That's a loss.
They go to Green Bay.
That's a loss.
They host Pittsburgh.
They could win that.
They go to New Orleans.
They could win that.
And they host Carolina.
They could win that. So what are we at there?
You said 2 losses, Arizona and Green Bay, for sure.
For sure.
And if they only lose those 2 games, then they would be at 8-8.
Okay, so yeah.
But I mean, that's the margin for error to get to 8-8. They can lose to the really good teams, and they have to win these so-so games against Cleveland or against Pittsburgh.
But you know what? I say
and then that game against New Orleans late is probably going to be still important.
I say that they will beat the Browns because the Browns are just schizophrenic as a team. But by the same token, the Browns will probably go in there and win 48-3. It's just there's no way to call it. But if I had to make a bet, I'd bet on the Falcons. But again,
here's what the Saints have on the other side of it.
Okay,
the Saints host Baltimore.
Baltimore's more than good enough to beat them at home.
They go to Pittsburgh.
They'll lose that. It's later. It's going to be really cold out at that point. They're done.
Yeah, November 30th. Host Carolina.
They should win that one.
At Chicago.
They'll lose that because it's outdoors and it's cold out.
Monday night in Chicago. Then they host Atlanta, and they finish at Tampa.
Wow. We could the worst case scenario here, which I think is probably what's going to happen, is we're going to be looking at 2 teams in the NFC South that are probably 7-9, maybe even 6-10. That you've got to go with tiebreakers to figure out who wins the division.
6-10. I don't know if I could. I mean, when we had the Rams win at 7, or the Seahawks win at 7-9,
right,
and then beat the Saints at home, it was like, okay, 7-9, but they were still really good at home, I guess. But 6-10, I don't think that we'll see a 6-10 division. I don't know if I can get behind that. But the point I'm trying to make here is that of 4 teams playing bad football, the Falcons are playing the best bad football of the 4 right now.
which isn't to say they're playing good football, but they are the least likely to shoot themselves in the foot at this point. So I think we're going to get 8-8, 7-9. No way do we get 9-7 or 10-6 out of this division, but it would be funny. Oh God, it'd be great. And you know what's going to happen?
Because right now, let's say Atlanta finishes 6-10, and they win the division somehow. They would have to host either Green Bay or Dallas. Oh my God! Could you imagine 6-10 Atlanta hosting like 7, or hosting, I don't know, what would that be, like 10-6 Dallas?
Oh wow!
And Dallas loses.
Well, you know they're gonna win their first round game, just like the Seahawks or the Seahawks did.
Yeah. Well, because they're gonna rally around no one thinks that we should be here. Let's show them who we are. Rah.
Right. Well, you know what? If you're 7-9, you really shouldn't be there. But it's just that you happen to fall into a bad division that 7-9 was good enough to win.
Is this one of the worst divisions you've ever seen?
I got to say, yeah, it really is.
I don't remember. I remember that NFC West being bad, and obviously with a 7-9 winner, but not this bad.
They were bad, like the Rams are bad, as in they didn't win a lot of games, but they were very competitive.
Yeah.
I think if I remember right, all those teams had a pretty good defense. They just had trouble scoring. But because that was when the 49ers were on the rise, when the Saints went 7-9, I believe, and who else is in the division? The Rams. But yeah, this is just. I've watched these teams, and they're just god-awful. It's not like – I don't think anybody was shocked beyond words when the Seahawks beat the Saints because they knew the Seahawks were capable of it. It was whether or not they could pull it off. This group, you just look at and you go, these are just – any other division, and these teams are just bringing up the rear in any other division in football, except probably the AFC West because you got the Raiders to contend with. But other than that –
yeah, well, because here, let's move on to another game real quick. And we talk about how bad it is, and I don't know how this Buccaneers team has won 2 games, but they've done it. They went into Washington and got a 27-7 win. I don't know what that says more about the Buccaneers or how bad Washington is.
A little of both, I think.
They were chanting for Colt McCoy halfway through this game when RG3 wasn't playing well.
That's when you know that as a fan base you have reached your absolute low. When you're chanting for Colt McCoy, like you look at him and you go, he's going to save us, that's when you know things are really, really bad.
RG3's done, right?
I got to think,
He will never be anywhere close to what he was in that rookie year.
No, I don't think so. I think maybe if he went to a different team and just got out of the nonsense that is the Washington football team, maybe. Yeah. But as long as he's there, and that team's screwed up enough without all the problems they're having with him. So as long as he's there now, it's over. And he's just – they ruined him his first year. I mean, he could have really been something, but Mike Shanahan trying to make a point.
Yeah, Mike Evans, the wide receiver for Tampa Bay, 209, 2 touchdowns. Good day for him.
Out of the 285 yards that one of the McCowns threw for in that game, 209 of them went to Mike Evans.
Yeah, on 7 receptions.
Right.
Which was basically half of his passes, 15 to 23. Right. That just, man, Washington's bad.
Yeah, they are.
Like we thought they were going to come around for a minute, and then they turned out to be just as bad as we thought they were.
Well, Kirk Cousins kind of screwed us in that deal. We really thought he was the second coming of I don't know.
Colt McCoy was 2-0. Why did they bench Colt McCoy? They're 3-7, and Colt McCoy had 2 of those 3 wins.
Well,
one against the freaking Cowboys. Like, come on.
Yeah, really. You can't. That's the problem, though. You see, this is where the money gets into it. You can't have RG3 healthy sitting on the bench behind Colt freaking McCoy, can you?
I was surprised that Colt McCoy still had a job, for one.
I didn't even know he was still in the league.
Right. But, yeah, RG3 was always going to start when he came back. And, and that's not even – I don't even know if that's a money thing as much as it's a Dan Snyder thing.
Yeah.
I guarantee you Dan Snyder went to Jay Gruden and said, hey, when RG3's even close to healthy, he's playing. And you know that. And RG3 knows that. Like, you listen to him in some of these interviews that he does when he's getting back and when he's trying to rehab and whatever. It's not so much a confidence that, I'm going to come back and I'm going to play. I don't even. It's because it's not cockiness. That's not the right word either.
He just knows. He's been informed ahead of time that as soon as you're healthy, you're going to play.
Pretty much, yeah. It's like he knows that even if he's slightly healthy, he's going to play. And so people are like, well, what about Colt McCoy? He's playing well. Do you think you would beat him out? And he just knows he doesn't have to be better. He just knows he has to be 85%.
Right.
And Dan Snyder will tell him will let them play.
Yeah, Washington has a lot of problems, and the biggest one is at the very top with Dan Snyder.
Yep.
They've got the resources, I think, that if he would get the hell out of the way and get some football people in there that knew what they were doing, and they could probably bring that franchise back to prominence. But as long as it's going like this, it's going to remain this way. You might see the occasional, would they go 10-6 the year they made the playoffs, RG3's first year, 9-7?
Yeah.
Something like that. You might see that happen every once in a great while, but if there's a team in football more dysfunctional than the Dallas Cowboys, it's got to be the Washington team, I think.
Yeah. And, well, I mean, Dallas is dysfunctional in a way that they make it to 8-8 every year.
Right.
You know, they're not terrible. They just always manage to find a way to screw it up. And, you know, for them to get to 8-8 this year would be a miracle. This is one of the few years that, you know, everything's kind of come together for them because they learned how to play football the right way.
Yeah.
You know? And, yeah, Washington just
a disaster.
Disaster from top to bottom.
Right.
We'll get one more disaster out of the way before we talk about some of the other good teams. The New York Football Giants. Eli Manning threw 5 interceptions on Sunday.
Yes, he sure did.
But despite those 5 interceptions, the 49ers only won by 6. And a 16-10 win on the road.
And the Giants, despite those 5 turnovers, despite how poorly they played, were in it all the way to the end.
I said that says more about the 49ers.
Absolutely, yeah. You got 5 turnovers, and you can only put up 16 points?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's like, oh, the 49ers, yeah, you know what? You can win a 16-10 game with 5 turnovers against the Giants. You're not going to do that against a good team. I mean, you might get 5 turnovers, but you can't go out and only score 16 in a game where you've got 5 takeaways and expect to win if you're in the playoffs. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah, they took over the lead or second place in the NFC West this week, just barely based on tiebreakers, because the Seattle Seahawks went into the Arrowhead Stadium in Kansas City, billed as the battle of the 2 really loud fan bases. And Jamal Charles had a day, 159 yards on 20 carries, 2 touchdowns to lead the Kansas City Chiefs to a 24-20 win, putting the Seahawks in a tie for second place and putting the Chiefs in a tie for first place in the AFC West.
Right. This Chiefs team is sneaky good. They're a lot better than I thought they were going to be this year. A lot better than I thought they were going to be.
You know what? I mean, at the end of it, they're kind of the same team they were last year.
Yeah, they're
right back where they were last year. They were, they were neck and neck with Denver before Denver pulled away, and I expect the same thing to happen this year. But Kansas City, right there, I mean, they're in first place in the wild card standings.
What they've got going for them, I suppose, is that if they do get to the playoffs, we've talked about it before, that things like a running game and a good defense, you can travel with that. You can be okay with that. But I just don't know that they're going to be able to hang with a Broncos team or a Patriots team or a Colts team and whatever disaster finds.
Yeah, they can hang with the Colts team.
But what I'm saying is that they I think Alex Smith had 106 yards passing, which is something like that, which is fine. But I just don't know how dependable that is going forward as you get to play against better teams. But this was a good football game. This was old school NFL, and I really enjoyed it. It was running game, good defense, enough scoring where it wasn't a 10-6 game where it was just boring and a snooze fest. It was a good football game. It was enjoyable to watch, but this Chiefs team they're dangerous. I think they have the Broncos coming up in the next week or 2. That's going to be an interesting game to watch.
Yeah, they go to Oakland on Thursday night this week, so.
Yeah, they got to be careful with that one. The
Seahawks, though, they're now 3 games behind in the NFC West and technically in 3rd place in the division.
Right.
I don't think anyone expected Arizona to be as good as they are and leave San Francisco and Seattle in the dust. But San Francisco and Seattle, they're 2 games ahead of St. Louis at this point.
Yeah. And the Seattle Marshawn Lynch is not happy. He's made it very clear that he wants a long-term deal, which I understand. You're a player, you want to make all the money you can, but the Seahawks are smart. He's coming up on his age 30 season, and we know what happens. Why, I don't know. But running backs at age 30, they're done. I don't understand it. It doesn't make any sense. But there's a lot of dysfunction going on there. And, last week it's all the Seahawks have won 3 straight, and they're back in it. But then they go out and they lose a game. Maybe they chase down a wild card spot, but I don't think they're a real threat to repeat at this point.
No. Both San Francisco and Seattle, 6-4. They're a game behind Dallas and Green Bay Dallas, Philadelphia, Green Bay, and Detroit are all 7-3. So 2 of those teams are winning the division, and 2 of them are going to the wild card. And I think that's kind of how it would stay for the rest of the year, because I don't see Green Bay slowing down.
No.
Dallas has the potential to slow down, but I don't think so. Philadelphia with Mark Sanchez, and we can talk about that in a second too. They looked good one week, and then they played the Packers, who probably are playing the best football in the league right now. Either them or New England.
Right, which scares me because they're the hot team right now.
Right, it could collapse at any time.
It's oh God, what are we talking about? The playoff thing.
Yeah,
Seattle's best hope is to try to hang with if they can manage to get to a point where they're tied with the Packers, they would win via the tiebreaker because of the head-to-head thing. Right. That's their best shot at this point, because I don't think the Packers go undefeated the rest of the way, but I think the Seahawks pretty much have to. Or maybe they can afford one more loss, but they've got their best hope, I think, of getting in is to hope that Dallas falls off, which I'm with you. I don't think they will, especially now with the Eagles, troubles with Mark Sanchez and all that. So that's their best shot, and that's not exactly the best position to be in.
Well, in Seattle has a rough go of it down the stretch here. They still have to play Arizona twice.
Right.
And San Francisco twice. And they go to Philadelphia and end with St. Louis, who has been shown, not an easy out this season.
No.
So all those teams except for St. Louis have a winning record. And who knows, by the time that happens, St. Louis might just be 500 or so. You never know. And
not to mention, you're not probably going to go 4-0 against the Cardinals and the 49ers, because four of your last 6 games are against those 2 teams.
Plus Philadelphia.
And Philadelphia. It's going to be a real tough road for them. I mean, if they can pull it off, then they deserve to be there. But
whereas San Francisco, much easier. They host Washington. They actually don't travel out of the Pacific time zone for the rest of the year.
That makes things a lot easier.
They host Washington. They host Seattle. They go to Oakland, to Seattle, host San Diego, host Arizona in the last game of the year, which could mean nothing for the Cardinals, and they lay down.
Right. And we might actually get to see Max Hall come back as the number 3 quarterback in that game.
No, Ryan Lindley signed last week.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. He's the number 3.
Of the 2 teams with the fading playoff hopes, the 49ers are definitely in better shape. But, man, they've got to learn how to score some points.
Yeah. But with that road win, they're 4-2 on the road, only 2-2 at home. Interesting.
Yeah, it is. I always make the joke about Colin Kaepernick and Andrew Luck. I'm going to take it a step further this week. How many people still want Kaepernick over Alex Smith right now?
Yeah. No, I mean, say what you want about Alex Smith. He's reliable at the very least. He doesn't make the huge mistakes.
No. And
is he the most dynamic quarterback you've ever seen? No. But I mean, you look at the Colts playoff game last year. Forget the end of it. They were up like 44-10, wasn't it? And Alex Smith looked like Joe Montana with the Chiefs.
Yeah.
He was rolling out, he was running, he was making all these great passes. He looked fantastic.
Well, what about that?
He could show those signs. When he was with the 49ers still.
That Saints game, I mean, he made some great plays in that game. That's the thing about the Chiefs. That's what makes him so dangerous. Is he's a guy that he can get you the play when you need it. They've got a good running game, and you put him with the 49ers. Now you've got Frank Gore as your running back. You got a good backup in Carlos Hyde. You've got probably a better receiving core than the Chiefs have.
Crabtree, Vernon Davis.
Yeah, it's
Anquan
Bolden. Yeah. Mm-hmm. All of a sudden, I'm looking at it going, the 49ers at this point in the proceedings probably are a better team right now with Alex Smith in there with Colin Kaepernick, which is just, you would have never thought that a year or 2 ago, but that's where we're at.
Yeah. Well, I think the thing with Kaepernick is, it's kind of the RG3 problem. You can only, and really the Michael Vick problem, you can only do that type of offense for so long, and that type of quarterback has a shelf life.
Exactly.
Now, I think Kaepernick's done a better job at not getting clobbered like Robert Griffin has.
Well, he's bigger. That helps. Yeah.
Right. But at the same time, I think people have just really started to figure him out. And you can even extend that to Russell Wilson, who kind of plays similarly but is smaller. He hasn't had the best year this year.
No.
Even compared to last year, which last year it was an okay year, but that's all he needed to be for the Seahawks with the way that defense was playing and the way Marshawn Lynch was. But, these guys are you can only do the same thing for so long in the NFL. If you're staying the same, you're falling behind.
Exactly.
If you're not constantly changing or trying to improve, then the rest of the NFL is going to catch up and pass you.
Well,
just as fast as it happens.
And Kaepernick's not a good enough quarterback to be able to adjust his game.
Right.
And just be a drop-back passer and throw to those good receivers. He's just not good enough to do that. So, it seemed like a smart move at the time for the 49ers. Looking back on it now, you look and go, I just don't, Kaepernick did some magical stuff, but like you said, teams catch up to that. And this isn't college where you're going to be able to get away with that forever and ever and ever. It's the NFL, and teams will figure out a way to beat it, and they have. I mean, a 5-turnover game and they get 16 points, that tells me all I need to know about the 49ers offense right there.
Let's round out the NFC West, at least in the early games, and let's talk about those St. Louis, for the time, Rams.
How about
22-7, knocking off the Broncos in St. Louis. That's the Rams have beaten some damn good teams this year.
Yeah,
and that defense is really starting to round into form.
They've got a good defense.
Imagine if they had a quarterback.
Yeah, exactly.
Sean Hill, by the way, came back in this game. No more Austin Davis.
Yeah, right after Jeff Fisher said that Davis was going to be a starter and blah 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 and all that, which is, I don't know what to make of this Rams team. I mean, they've beaten the 49ers, they've beaten the Seahawks, they've beaten the Broncos. Mm-hmm. And they beat the Broncos soundly. I mean, that wasn't one of those squeak it out at the end games. I mean, they just dominated.
No, they really got after Peyton Manning in this game.
Yeah,
and they held it tight with the Cardinals a week ago. And who was the other team they beat? Oh, Tampa Bay.
Yeah.
But, think about this Rams team, okay? They had a big lead against Dallas.
Yep.
They had a big lead against Philadelphia and blew it. If they have those two games, they're 6-4.
Exactly.
They're right there with everybody else.
And they've got the tiebreaker over the two teams in front of them.
Right. And, I'm looking at their schedule. At San Diego, home against Oakland, at Washington, Arizona, the Giants, and Seattle. I'm not saying, but, I think at the very least, they might just finish with a winning record at the end of this.
It's not the craziest thing in the world to say they might run the table and go 10-6. I don't think they will.
But this team in the NFC South, they win the division.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, easily. But they're an interesting bunch. I mean, I will say this, that I would have never expected in a million years for them not only to be 4-6 at this point, but to have beaten the teams they've beaten to get there. Mm-hmm. And it's too bad that defense, which has really come into its own now, wasn't this good back when they played Dallas and Philadelphia and would have been able to hold a lead like that, because they did it against the Broncos. But I just want to say, too, with the Broncos, everybody's like, oh, there's something. No, it was just a game. It was one of those games.
Happens.
It just happens. And you want to say, okay, they're done and they've got problems and all that. That's on you. But there's not a thing wrong with the Broncos. It was just a game that probably didn't mean a lot to them. Tough place to play. You got a Rams team that's out playing good football right now. Just one of those things. So let's get off the what's wrong with the Broncos kick right now. Not a thing. They're going to be fine.
They're fine. They're going to keep winning games. That's always silly to me.
But it's the NFL, and that's the way the media works now. You have to overreact to everything. But there's not a thing wrong with the Broncos. They're 7-3. They're in the driver's seat in the AFC West. They're going to be just fine. Not a thing to worry about.
Yeah, the Chiefs have tied them for first place. Oh, my God, they're going to fall again. No, this happened last year.
Yeah.
The Chiefs were right with them, and then they finally played the Chiefs, and they knocked their doors off.
If I remember right, I think the Chiefs were ahead of them at this point last year. Well, they weren't even tied. They were a game or two up. And
I think Denver was 8-1, and the Chiefs were 9-1.
Something like
9-0.
that,
yeah. And I think they played in Week 10, and then that kind of flipped the script. But they're fine. Peyton Manning still threw for 389 yards.
Yeah,
come on, he was fine. The Rams defense just had a really good day, and the Broncos offense just they racked up the yards, just couldn't finish. So
when the Broncos finish the season at 12-4 or 11-5, we're not going to be talking about the game they lost to the Rams back in week whatever this is.
Right.
It's not even going to be an issue. So let's just stop worrying about the Broncos and forget about it.
Yeah, they're still going to end up with a bye. They'll be fine. Don't worry about them.
Exactly.
On the other hand, the bottom of the Broncos division, the Raiders still winless. 0-10 after a 13-6 loss to the Chargers. The Chargers still not looking fantastic.
No.
They're 6-4. They're right there with the rest of the wild card teams in the AFC. But this team was good at the beginning of the year, and then they hit that just wall in Miami, And since then, they've been kind of awful.
Yeah, I don't know how that happens. I guess, did that loss, did it really affect them that badly? But they looked like a serious contender for the first few weeks of the season. But now, I'm not even sure I'd bet on making the playoffs at this point.
Like, I can't remember anything in particular that – I don't think they've lost anybody in particular. Rivers is still fine. Antonio Gates is there. All the receivers are working. I don't know. Like, I haven't watched a whole lot of Charger football this year, but
they should have scored more than 13 points against the Raiders. I'll say that.
Yeah, well, yeah. This Raiders team's bad. I don't know. I don't know what to do with the Chargers right now.
I'm not betting on them to make the playoffs. It's just too much in front of them. I don't know that they've got enough to get past some of the teams that they're chasing right now.
And they host St. Louis this next week. And, I wouldn't be in the least bit surprised if they lost to St. Louis. I have no confidence in the Chargers right now, and I have a lot of confidence in what the Rams are doing right now. So,
yeah.
I don't know. Anyway, move on to the afternoon games. That was one of the afternoon games.
They're just the typical Chargers. They do what they do every year.
Let's see. Let's start with the best record in the National Football League. Break up the Arizona Cardinals, 9-1, 6-0 at home after a 14-6 win over the Detroit Lions. The Cardinals scored 14 points in the first quarter, and that was it. The Lions got 2 field goals in the first half, and that was it. Not the most entertaining of football games between two teams with pretty good records there in the NFC, battling for dominance in the NFC. Drew Stanton did enough, and the defense was good, and the Cardinals are still chugging along.
Yeah, this was a game I thought the Cardinals, this was going to be a real test for them because Detroit they've got the best defense in the NFL right now.
Yeah.
And I thought it would be a real test, but I don't know that the Lions really, they scored the 14 points. It turns out that's all they needed. I just didn't think that this game did not go at all the way I thought it would. I really thought this would be more of a 24-21 type thing or something like that, but I think they're legit. I think the Cardinals are legit. I think that they've got Drew Stanton as a quarterback, but they play a style of football. I think we talked about it a couple weeks ago. They aren't flashy. They don't need a Peyton Manning or an Aaron Rodgers to run their offense. They can get it done with the way they're doing it, and this is a big win for them. And they are in the driver's seat now for home field advantage throughout the playoffs, which will make things very interesting.
I think they're kind of legit. They have a very good defense, and they can score some points. But I don't know if they can do enough when it comes down to crunch time later. Like, if the Cardinals played the Packers right now, I would have to give it to the Packers, right?
Right now, yeah. But
because I don't know. Like, I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop with this Cardinals team. Like, they've taken a lot of body blows when it comes to injuries and things like that. And they've hung on, and good for them. And they're leading the division by 3 games now. Like you said, they're 2 games ahead of everybody else in terms of the NFC lead. But I don't know. There's nothing for me to really latch onto with this team that really inspires me and says, yeah, you know what? I'm with this team. They have a very good defense. They can run the ball effectively. Drew Stanton is serviceable. 306 yards, 21 of 32, nothing to shake at, especially against the best defense in the league. But I don't know. They leave me uninspired.
Like I said, they're not. If you're looking for exciting football, the last place you want to go is the Arizona Cardinals. You're not going to see it, sure. But they win, and they've beaten good teams. They just, if they get home field throughout the playoffs, I think it's going to be very tough to beat them at the big toaster oven. Yes. It's going to be very hard to do. The Packers, they could probably score points on them, but I don't think the Packers, the Cardinals, while they don't have a flashy offense, I don't know that they wouldn't have a better time against an easier defense like the Packers. I don't think the Packers defense still worries me. It's played well of late, but we'll see with the Cardinals. I think they're legit. I think that I don't know if they're going to win the Super Bowl legit, but I don't think this 9-1 is a mirage like a lot of people think it is. I think they're a very good football team.
No, I don't think the 9-1's a mirage. I think they've also been benefited by the schedule a little bit. But yeah, they're winning the games. But we'll be talking about probably their best competition in the NFC right now. Your Green Bay Packers, 50-point games in back-to-back weeks in a home blowout of the Eagles. Mark Sanchez
Probably not the answer.
4 turnovers for the Eagles offense. And I don't know. The Packers are hitting on all cylinders right now.
Yeah, it's kind of scary because...
Is it too early, you think?
I don't know.
Would you rather see this in weeks 15 and 16?
I don't see any reason why they can't continue this. But the thing about the Packers is they're not doing anything that I would consider remarkable. They're just, it's remarkable they're scoring 50 points a game, but they're not.
They're just clicking?
They're just doing what they do, and people can't seem to stop it for some reason. I really thought that this Eagles game would be a lot closer than this. I figured the Packers would score points. I didn't think, even with Mark Sanchez, they'd be able to shut down the Eagles' offense the way they did. That was the thing that concerned me. But if the defense, if the defense plays well, if they have fixed the problems they had early on with the defense, I like them as the best team in the NFC right now. But that's a big if. That's all contingent on the defense, which I still think is a bit spotty.
Yeah. By the way that you're going to be able to tell how good this Packers team really is, they're at Minnesota next week. Should be a win. And then the week after, they host the Patriots in Lambeau. That'll be a good game.
That'll be a great game. But
especially because I think the Packers are playing the best football in the NFC right now. And if we move on to the Sunday night game, I think the Patriots might be playing some of the best football in the league too.
Remember a month and a half ago, we were like,
when they lost to the Chiefs on Monday night. Oh my God, the end of the Patriots dynasty.
We were like, I don't know if this team even makes the playoffs this year. Holy hell!
No, that is incorrect.
Yeah.
Okay, Greg, I'm going to throw a name out at you, and I'm just going to ask you: do you know who this person is now? 2, did you know who this person was before yesterday?
Okay.
Jonas Gray?
Nope, had no clue who he was until yesterday.
Practice squad guy?
Yeah.
Who got 38 carries, 199 yards, and 4 touchdowns on the ground. By the way, those 4 touchdowns on the ground, more than the entire NFL scored on Sunday. There were less than 4 rushing touchdowns by the rest of the league, and Jonas Gray had 4 in his rookie debut against the Colts at home on Sunday nights in a 42-20 just evisceration of the Colts. The Colts were never in this thing.
This Patriots team, if you remember back way early on, there was talk. You remember how ridiculous does it sound now? They should sit Tom Brady and start Jimmy Garoppolo. Okay.
Yeah, right.
This Patriots team, but we've seen it before with these guys. They're going to be great in the regular season, and but can they finish the deal? Can they win the Super Bowl? That's the big question mark with them. When do they play the Packers? In 2 weeks?
2 weeks.
See, I think that Lambeau Field is a big home field advantage, so you always got to kind of throw a little bit out of what the Packers do because they do it at home. Mm-hmm. On a neutral site, that would be something, and it might end up being a neutral site game.
Right. And the Patriots host the Lions next week too, so they get a nice hard stretch of teams here with the Colts, Lions, and Packers back to back to back.
Wow.
And the Colts, man, they can't stop the run. Like, I knew that before, but who the hell is Jonas Gray? Why does he run for 200 yards? This is dumb. And do you want to take a guess at who the leading rusher for the Indianapolis Colts was on Sunday?
Probably Andrew Luck.
He had 3 carries. 3 carries.
Probably Andrew Luck.
3 carries, 15 yards.
Yeah.
I mean, they lost Ahmad Bradshaw on the game, and that hurts. And the majority of the Colts' running game was kind of short passes to him out of the backfield. But now he's gone. They signed Joshua Cribbs this morning. You know, the Browns released Ben Tate. I'm sure he'll be in Indianapolis by Wednesday.
You know what, though? I don't think Tate would be a bad pickup for the Colts. Granted, he's not a number 1 Adrian Peterson-style running back, but I think he's got enough talent to help that running game a lot. Now, with Cribbs, what are they going to – are they going to go Denard Robinson with Cribbs here? I mean, it's a neat idea if they try it.
I don't know. I don't know exactly what they're going to do because the only thing anyone knows Josh Cribbs for is for returning punts.
Right.
And that's not the Colts' problem right now. I don't know.
But
the thing that bothers me is that I already know how this season's going to end. They're gonna win the division because the Texans. Come on, I mean, the Texans are a game behind the Colts, so
I will say
possible, but I don't think so.
I like the Texans a lot better with Ryan Mallett quarterback than I did with Ryan Fitzpatrick. I think Mallett's going to be a decent NFL quarterback, and he makes a big difference.
If the Colts collapse and lose to the freaking Texans, then there's a lot more issues than I think.
I don't think that's going to happen, but
right, they're going to win the division. They're going to host the first-round playoff game. They might win that playoff game just because Andrew Luck's pretty good. Then they're going to go to Denver and New England. They're going to get blown out. The same thing that happened last year.
Yeah. And
then they're going to go into this offseason, and they're probably going to wait too long, not sign anybody of note, sign some 3-bit friggin' left tackle backup. And then they're going to go next season saying, hey, we're going to try it again with Trent Richardson, and I'm going to not watch.
If Trent Richardson still has a job in the National Football League after this season, then all I can say is that NFL executives or front office people, personnel people, are a lot dumber than I give them credit for. That guy is awful.
When the Colts go into the draft, they should only be drafting running backs, offensive linemen, defensive linemen, and linebackers. If they draft anything other than that, I will scream. Because that has been this team's problem for the last 3 years, is they can protect Andrew Luck well enough now. They can't force any holes up front. They can't plug any holes on the other side. And, the running backs don't know where to go because they're not good enough to get out of tight situations.
Well,
so
Trent Richardson, you could give him the hole the size of a semi-truck, and I still think he'd only get 2 yards.
He would probably run into one of the linemen on accident.
I don't know that I can think of a draft pick that high in the draft that was as big a miss as he's been in the last 10 years.
Well, he was worth another first-round pick, I guess.
Well, yeah.
But so the Colts, and the Patriots are 8-2, on top of the AFC and looking pretty gosh darn good.
Well, because that's what it's going to come down to in the end with the AFC is if the Broncos get home field, they're probably your Super Bowl representatives. If the Patriots get it, they're going to the Super Bowl.
Probably.
But that aside, I do see one team on there that I think if they play two teams actually, if they play the kind of football they're capable of, could knock off one of those two teams. That would be either the Chiefs or maybe the Dolphins, if the Dolphins get there. But that's, again, a big if, and a lot of things have to happen, and we're still 5 weeks away from even talking about that. So it's not completely set in stone, but it's getting pretty close. We've got cement that's getting ready to set, or whatever they call it here.
Let's finish up with Monday night. The Steelers with another comeback to beat the Titans on the road, 27-24. The Steelers 7-4.
I still think the Ravens are the best team in that division, though, which isn't saying much, but I still think they are.
7-4, and they're in second place because ties.
Yeah.
Anyway, that is week, what is this, 12?
Something like that.
That was week 11. Week 11.
Week 11, okay.
In the NFL. We'll move on to college football. And, again, some big games. A game that we thought might have been an elimination game with Mississippi State, Alabama. But I don't know if it's really an elimination game.
Yeah.
I think the loser still very much in play because of how tight some of these other games are and some of the upsets we've had in some of these other games that are kind of knocking off any contenders at the back end of this playoff.
Yeah, I have to agree with that. I think that Mississippi State's still going to be very much in the thick of it when the rankings come out tonight.
Yep, Mississippi State, they were the number one team in the land. They went to Tuscaloosa to play the Crimson Tide. Things didn't start off well for Mississippi State. They got the a safety put on them early, so it was 2-0. And Alabama just kind of went from there. But it was still a very tight football game. It was 19-3 at half. Mississippi State came out and they were able to shut down Alabama's run game and run the ball extremely well in the second half. And they kept it close. They missed a couple fourth down opportunities to lose 25-20. But they made a game of it, and that's the most important part here with some of these losses, because we saw it with Ole Miss and Auburn, where Ole Miss, despite losing, they didn't drop out of the top 10, and Ole Miss is still right there with everybody else now too, and now only losing by 5 to Alabama, who if I had to do this now, I would probably vault Alabama to number 1.
I would, absolutely.
because Oregon, maybe only to number 2, because Oregon didn't do anything this week because they didn't play, so you can't fault them for that, really.
No,
but Florida State keeps winning, but not impressively. TCU won barely, and you beat the number 1 team in the country when you were number 5. I would have no problem if they ended up number 1 in these rankings. But the other thing is, because of how tight the other games are, and like I said, with some of these teams losing behind them, I would say Mississippi State only falls to 5 at the least.
I think they're going to stay in. I think they're going to stay in the top 4. I do.
I could definitely see them only falling to 4. And putting them behind Oregon and Florida State or something like that.
The second half of that game made all the difference for the Mississippi State Bulldogs because it looked like it was going to be a blowout. Had it been a blowout, they probably dropped right out. Maybe they dropped to 9, 10, 11 down in that range. But because they came back and they had opportunities, they had a lot of chances where they could have won this game, but they didn't. So I think that's going to play big with the committee. And I think you're right. I think they dropped no further, at the very most, to 6. But I think they stay in the top 4 even after the loss.
And even then, if they stay 4 or 5 and they win out, and even if they don't make the SEC title game, they're still going to have to beat Ole Miss, who's still going to be ranked.
Right.
And that would, if some of these other teams are going to lose, I would give Mississippi State that 4th slot. If the rest of these teams, if everything kind of stays where it is at the top, and they continue to win out, I would vault them over Florida State or TCU.
Exactly.
For spots.
Well, I think you said it last week that a game like this, when it's close like that, it's basically because of the home field. That was the difference in this game, and that's what it looks like on the scoreboard. Whereas like Vegas will automatically give you 3 points because you're at home or whatever. That's basically what this came down to. So even though they lost, I'm with you. I don't think they dropped very far, and I wouldn't be a bit surprised if they stay in the top 4.
But I think there's no doubt between either of us that Alabama's the number 1 team in the country, right?
Without question.
Even if they're not number 1 when it comes to the little number next to their name, they're the best team in the country.
I have to agree. They're amazing. I mean, we were ready to write them off after they lost to, was it Ole Miss, I think, beat them a while back, and then they didn't play so well, and then they came back and they put up that 59-point win over, I think it was Texas A&M.
Yeah.
And since then, they've been playing like the Alabama Crimson Tide that we know, but we're still very much in play for 2 SEC teams to make this playoff the first time around at this point.
I think that's the case, but I also think, and this is something probably that'll just work itself out as we get closer to it, I'm still of the mind that they may try to rig this thing in the first year, that there isn't 2 teams from one conference.
That wouldn't surprise me either.
Because I could, despite us thinking Mississippi State only falls to 5, and if they win out, but if the other teams went out in front of them, any of those teams would say like, well, why were we jumped? We won.
Yeah.
Or we were a conference champion, and they weren't. So I could definitely see where that comes into play, but we'll get to the rest of the games real quick, and we can kind of talk about it big picture. We'll go to Oregon, like we said, didn't play. Number 3, Florida State. I'm so done with the Seminoles football team.
Yeah,
I am so ready for them to just lose. And I really thought that this was going to be the game for them to do it. And we talked about it last week, that it was going to be a tough game, and it was possible. And then Miami goes up, 21-0?
23-7 was the biggest lead they had, I believe.
23-7?
Yeah.
And it looked like they're in Miami, and it looked like, well, maybe this is the time, because Miami's actually a pretty good team. Their quarterback was playing well. Florida State is finally going to go down this week after being down for the 6th time this year to a subpar opponent. And Florida State, people want to give them credit because they keep finding ways to win football games. That's a championship mentality. That's all fine and well.
That's great if you're beating Alabama and Mississippi State every week. Yeah, that's a very legitimate argument.
Right.
But
if you're down to Alabama, if you're down to Mississippi State or Alabama or any of these good teams every week, then great, and you're coming back to win, fine. But when you're down to Miami and NC State and Louisville,
right,
and Wake Forest, even though it was only 3-0, and Virginia, and we talked about it before the show. They're big wins. Clemson and Notre Dame, both those teams have lost and dropped precipitously in the rankings, especially Notre Dame. We could talk about that dumpster fire towards the bottom. But Florida State's impressive wins, no longer as impressive, And any of their normal wins haven't been impressive at all. They had, I think they blew out Wake Forest, and I'm pretty sure that's it when it comes to taking care of business the way that they should type games.
They beat a pretty bad Syracuse team. They beat them by 18, which is it's a pretty big win. But again, if you're going to be, if Florida State was ranked 5 or 6, 7, I'd have no argument whatsoever with what they're ranking. But they are not, based on what I've seen, and I've seen, I think everyone in the top 10 play at least once this season. They are not as good as their ranking. They're not that impressive. Yeah, they keep winning, but they're not beating anybody. You shouldn't have trouble if you're the number 3 team, or what they're going to be number 1 now. If you're the number 1 team in the country, you should have no trouble knocking off a Syracuse or a Virginia or somebody like that. And they're having trouble doing that kind of stuff. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, you're the reigning national champs. You're undefeated. That's what's on your resume. Those are the 2 big points. Congratulations, and that's great. But when you break it down further, they're just not what they were last year. The ACC is terrible.
It is.
And they really don't have any signature wins. Yes, they beat Clemson at home in overtime in a game where Jameis Winston was suspended. So you can make the argument, well, if Jameis Winston plays that game, they probably beat them by more. Maybe they do. And maybe that's another notch in the belt. But you beat Notre Dame
barely
on a offensive pass interference call that some people think is debatable.
Right.
And now that Notre Dame team lost big to Arizona State, who has now lost. So that makes that a little bit worse. And who lost at home to freaking Northwestern.
Right.
And again, that team that we saw all year that was struggled with North Carolina and Navy for a minute. And the Notre Dame win, not good either. And the Louisville win, they were down 24 points to Louisville. They had to come back. I don't care that was on the road. I don't care that Louisville was ranked at the time. That's not what a national championship contender has to do week in and week out.
When we started the season, we got about 2 weeks into it, and there were 3 teams that we thought were just ridiculously overrated. They were Florida State, Notre Dame, and UCLA. Since then, UCLA and Notre Dame have proven that we were right. They were overrated. Florida State has done nothing differently except not lose the games that Notre Dame and UCLA lost. They managed to hang on and win games they probably shouldn't have won. And that's the key difference between those 3 teams right now. Florida State is still overrated. If they get into the playoff, they're going to go out in the first round because I'm looking at
no doubt.
I don't know who they would beat. I mean, maybe they get lucky and Ohio State sneaks and they could probably beat Ohio State, but other than that, no, that's not going to happen. Maybe TCU, but it's...
And Florida State doesn't have really any place for them to stumble at this point. Because I think they play BC in their last ACC game, and then they play Florida. And maybe Florida did fire their coach this week. They fired Will Muschamp, but he's going to play out the string here. But that's a rivalry game. Maybe
Florida decides to send. They do the big thing for their coach and that type of thing. And who knows?
They did rise up and beat Georgia a couple weeks ago, so it's possible. But I don't see it. And then when it comes to the ACC title game, who are they going to play this? I think they would play either Georgia Tech or Duke. And Duke, of course, unfortunately lost.
And our Blue Devils, that's it. The national championship dream is over.
But the dream for 10 wins is still very much alive.
Absolutely.
They could still do that if they win out, I believe. But yeah, it's not Florida State doesn't have any stumbling blocks, but they're going to get to the playoff, so they're probably going to get to the playoff. And I hope they play Alabama. And I hope Alabama beats them by 50. I have no reason to hate Florida State.
I don't either. I actually like them.
None of my teams ever played Florida State. I always liked Bobby Bowden. I like their uniforms. I like them in general. I had one of my high school coaches. He loved Florida State. He was always talking about the Seminoles and doing the tomahawk chop every Monday morning when we come in. But I hate this particular Florida State team because I hate them the same reason that many of you know that I hate the Los Angeles Kings, for example. If you're a good team, play good.
Right.
Be good. Don't be this half-assed, well, maybe, sort of, kind of, and then, we're just going to pull out a win here. No. If you're a good team, go be a good team. Don't do this all the time.
They're just very unimpressive. I guess you could say that it's impressive that they keep winning these games. But what's unimpressive is they shouldn't be in the position where they have to keep winning these games like this. That's the difference. That's my problem with them. They're not as good as their ranking. It's as simple as that.
Yep. We'll move on to the number 4 team in the country who, again, wasn't very impressive. They went on the road to freaking Kansas.
Yeah.
The Jayhawks. And Kansas was up for a decent point in this game. TCU came back and made it close and finally took the lead there late. But the Kansas Jayhawks were very much in a position to knock off the number 4 team in the country. And TCU, they've played some tight ones here and there too. They've had a lot of blowouts because they had the offense to do so, but some of their one loss to Baylor was tight. Their games against West Virginia were tight. Oklahoma was even a tight game too, and they're doing a balancing act right now. And again, the thing that still bothers me about TCU and where they are in the rankings is if the season ended today and they were ahead of Baylor, Baylor still has the tiebreaker, but somehow is ranked behind them.
I think that what we're going to see with TCU in this Kansas game is the committee's finally going to end their love affair with TCU. This will probably be the week where Baylor will jump them in the standings, despite the fact that TCU won. But come on, this Kansas team was 3-6 going into that game. This is not a good football team. And it was on the road and all that, but in the same kind of thing we're holding Florida State to, you got to hold TCU to the same thing. This is a game they should not have had trouble with, and they did.
No.
And I really believe that the love affair with TCU ends this week.
This is one of the reasons why I think Mississippi State isn't going to fall as far, because they might just fall to 4 because they might say, well, TCU back up. Who's number 5?
It was
5 was
Alabama was 5 going into
Alabama was 5, right? And so they won. Arizona State was 6 and lost. And Baylor was 7 and didn't play. So I could very much see a situation where, you move Mississippi State to 4, and I guess you move Baylor to 5 and TCU to 6. Just to kind of right the ship.
I think so, because it's just, especially now, it's very tough for me to justify putting TCU in front of Baylor. It was before, but now with this game, this is where the love affair ends. This is where TCU probably falls out of the top 4.
Right.
They almost have to.
TCU only has 1 game left, I believe. I think it's against Texas.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Baylor has Oklahoma State.
They have 2 left. They are at Texas, and they have Iowa State at home. TCU does.
Okay. And Baylor has Oklahoma State and I believe Kansas State, which would be another ranked team. And we kind of thought that if they beat Kansas State, then they'll jump over them anyway. But why wait? Just do it now. Like you know what the tiebreakers are. And we talked about it before, where it's kind of one of those things where you lose a tight game like that. They lost. TCU and Baylor. Baylor beat them by 3 points in Baylor. So I guess that's kind of the position where they say it's so tight that you put them ahead of them. But if it came down to the end of the season and TCU was still ranked ahead of them and they weren't the champ, then that made no sense to me. But
there's just no way in the world, if Baylor wins the Big 12, can they put TCU ahead of them. You just can't do that, because if they're going to put a premium on conference championships, it has to apply to all 5 super or big conferences, whatever they call it, the Big 5.
The Power 5.
The Power 5. You can't say, well, that counts for the Big 10, it counts for the SEC, it counts for the ACC, and it counts for the Pac-12. But guess what? We're going to suspend that rule for the Big 12. You can't do that. So there's just, if they both win out, there's no way TCU stays in this spot. They just can't. It just can't happen.
Nope. But we'll move on to number 6 reluctantly.
Yeah, what happened there?
The Arizona State Sun Devils went into Corvallis, and they were down early, and they went back up, and then they went back down. It was almost like a reverse of what happened to them against Notre Dame. I don't know. I didn't get a chance to watch this. I was working that night, but I get the updates on my phone, and it just I kind of knew that this was possible, that Arizona State could go off in Oregon State, because like I told you, when I was growing up, I watched a lot of USC football, and I saw many a very good USC team go into Oregon State and lose a dumb football game.
Yeah.
And have national championship hopes dropped, or lose out on a chance at the Pac-12 title or whatever. And Oregon State is one of those tough places to play. I mean, they're only 2-5 in the Pac-12. They're 5-5 overall, but that's a tough place to play every week. And they just, I don't know. It could have been just like an emotional letdown after the Notre Dame game, or what. But they lose, and now they're 5-2. They're out of the national championship race. That's done. And the thing that's rough for them is they're now 5-2 in the Pac-12. So they have 2 losses in the Pac-12, the same as Arizona, same as UCLA, same as USC. So they go from national championship hope to in danger of missing the Pac-12 championship game.
Yeah, it was a tough loss for Arizona State. But I will say this is no knock on the Sun Devils at all. But of the teams that were up in the top 8, I think that they were one of the ones that everything had to go exactly their way for them to stay there.
No, they had to win out.
Yeah, and like you said, Corvallis, that's a tough place to play. And we said it last week on the show that Oregon State, we didn't expect them to win, but it wouldn't be the biggest shocker in the world if Oregon State pulled off the upset, and that's exactly what they did, and effectively ended Arizona State's title hopes for sure. And put them in a real tough spot in the Pac-12 now, which is too bad.
Well, and here's the rough part too. Even if ASU wins out now, they might still miss out on the Pac-12 championship game. Yeah. Because if UCLA wins out, then UCLA and ASU would have the same record, and ASU would lose the tiebreaker because UCLA beat them. So they go, like I said, they go from national championship hope to very much in contention to not make the Pac-12 title game.
Man, it was a tough loss. It was one that they just could not afford, and it ended it all pretty much. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh well.
It was a good run, man. It was. Yeah, I don't think that
it was fun.
In week 5, any of us expected them to be in the national championship talk by week 11. Yeah. And then they were right in the thick of it.
Yeah, and maybe hopefully they can win out, and hopefully UCLA stumbles. Hopefully this weekend the USC, that'd be fun. And then ASU could, if ASU is still able to win out and maybe even knock off Oregon in the Pac-12 title game, they're not going to be in the national championship, but they'd be in contention for one of those big New Year's Day bowls.
Right.
A lot of people had them even if they lost to Oregon in the Pac-12 title game. A lot of people had them going to the Fiesta Bowl, which would be awesome. To go to a big time bowl game basically in your backyard. So
absolutely.
So we'll see how that plays out. But number 6 ASU goes down. Number 7 Baylor did not play, like we said. But number 8, the Ohio State Buckeyes. Thanks to some of this chaos and some of these really tight, unconvincing wins, maybe Ohio State kind of sneaked back up, and all of a sudden, hey. Maybe you make the playoff at the end of this thing if things keep going your way.
Well, I've been saying it for about 3 weeks now. They need a lot of things to happen, but that list of things that need to happen keeps getting shorter every week. Mm-hmm. They're in the best position they've been in all season. Now, the Virginia Tech loss is still a big blotch on the record, but they have gone on the road and beaten 2 ranked teams. Now, I think that the win against Michigan State's a little more impressive than beating Minnesota, but Minnesota's a pretty good team this year. But, yeah. I think the Buckeyes probably move up to maybe 7 or 6 after this.
Right.
So they're still in that position where they still need things in front of them to happen. But that list was, say, 30 things long 2 weeks ago. It's down to about 6 things now. So there's still hope. And
right. And even if they don't make the playoff, they're still going to make one of those big bowls. They're not going to make to the Rose Bowl because the Rose Bowl is a semifinal. But, they're right there for the Cotton Bowl, the Fiesta Bowl. The Peach Bowl and the Orange Bowl.
Right.
I think those are the other games.
Oh yeah, this is a team that after that Virginia Tech loss, it was, and they were like, we'll never get past Michigan State. So they've righted the ship and put themselves in the best position under the circumstances they could be in right now, I think.
Yep. So good for your Buckeyes. Moving to number 9, and remember when we thought Auburn was the best team in the country?
Yeah.
Not so much anymore.
But
with a 34-7 loss to Georgia.
But I will say this: we talked about Georgia last week. I said, you know what? Georgia's sneaking into this thing quietly.
Well, because Georgia was 15, they beat number 9 by a good margin. They're going to be in the top 10 next week.
Absolutely.
Or, come tonight. Just depends on where they happen to fall in the top 10. And I mean, as long as they're right there, if they can still make it to the SEC title game, and if they win the SEC. there's no doubt that they make the top 4 at that point, right?
Right. I mean, that's we talk about Ohio State having a lot of things they have to have happen. And the list keeps getting shorter. That list is getting really short for the Georgia Bulldogs right now. They are in a pretty good spot. Despite having 2 losses, I think their playoff hopes are still pretty alive. Now,
especially if you get to a point where, say, Ole Miss knocks off Mississippi State,
right,
and Auburn beats Alabama, which is still entirely possible.
Yep.
Then you have chaos reign, and maybe you have Ohio State and Georgia playing each other in the playoff.
That's the thing. You know what I'm going to do, too, because the rankings will come out tonight. When we do our segment on the playoff rankings on Thursday, I'm going to put together the scenarios and how we'll take like the top 8 teams and see what would have to happen for them to get into the mix, because it's going to be nutty. And Georgia quietly sneaking right back into things here. I don't know if they're good enough to beat Alabama or Mississippi State in the title game if that's who they end up getting. But they're, again, a team that you thought their season was over a few weeks back, and not only are they still in the thick for an SEC title, but they might actually be in the playoff talk, which is nutty. But here we are.
The bad thing for them, they got Todd Gurley back, and he combined for 282 on the ground with the other running back there for Georgia, but he also got hurt in the game, so Todd Gurley is out.
Okay, well that hurts.
I believe for the rest of the year. But they did fine without him there when he was suspended, so they know they can win without him.
Right.
Are they as big of a threat? Maybe not, but they're still a talented team, and they can still try and make some noise here late.
Right.
We'll move on. Let's see. Who was 10 and 11?
Where is 10 and
10?
11?
10 was Ole Miss, and they were off.
Okay.
Who was 11? Why can I not? I wish the rankings would load for me.
Hold on a second. I can tell you here. 11 was UCLA last week.
Okay, UCLA, and they were off also.
Okay, so you go
that's right. They play USC this week.
Go down to number 12, Michigan State.
Number 12, yeah, I have those. 12 was Michigan State. With a nice 37-15 win over Maryland, who is 3-3 in their first season in the Big Ten. But hey, they're bowl eligible. So.
Not bad, really. I didn't think Maryland would go 3-3 in the Big Ten, so that's not bad.
Good for them. Number 13,
K-State, Kansas
State. They were off. Are they off again this week? No, they play West Virginia on Thursday.
Oh, that could be a tricky game for them.
Yep. Number 14, the Arizona Wildcats. Just so barely with a win there over Washington, 27-26. Just barely staying in the Pac-12 hunt. They're at 5-2 in the Pac-12. They gotta win out. They gotta beat. Actually, yeah, they have the same problem as ASU, where even if they win out, UCLA beat them.
Right.
So they got to hope UCLA loses to SC this weekend or somewhere else down the road. We'll move on to let's see. Oh God, this is rough. Number 15 was Georgia, of course, and they beat Auburn. Number 16, the Nebraska Cornhuskers.
The team that was actually in a position to make a halfway legitimate run at a playoff spot. And another one of those teams we said was ranked too highly. Boy, did they prove it on Saturday.
Yeah, well, the thing was, too, despite them winning last week, they still dropped 3 spots.
Right.
So I think the committee was finally like, why do we have Nebraska so high?
Exactly.
And so they slid down to 16. They were playing number 20, Wisconsin. And, they weren't really necessarily playing Wisconsin as much as they were playing Melvin Gordon, who rushes for the single-game Division 1A FBS rushing record. 408 yards on 25 carries, and that was only through 3 quarters of play. He sat the entire fourth quarter, missed out on going for the big record, the NCAA record of 465 yards.
Wow.
But, yeah, Nebraska, they're supposed to pride themselves on the defense, so does Bo Pelini. But they got just dump-trucked by Melvin Gordon and the Badgers.
I think if they'd left Melvin Gordon in that game, I think he could have gotten 500 yards. I really believe it.
Yeah. Well, and it's something that's interesting that I saw a little graphic of it. Wisconsin running backs have 3 of the major rushing and scoring records in Division 1A.
Really?
They now have the single-game rushing record with Melvin Gordon. They have most touchdowns in a career by Monte Ball.
Right.
And they have most rushing yards by Ron Dane.
Wow.
So Wisconsin, the new running back U?
I guess so.
Yeah.
But yeah, Nebraska was just exposed big time, and it was just, geez.
Well, and this is good for Ohio State too. If Wisconsin can prove that they're good, and I'm sure a win like this puts them at least in the high teens.
Right.
And by that I mean like 12, 13, 14. And they'll probably have to play them in the Big Ten title game, and if you get that win, then it's a little bit more.
Yeah, Ohio State needs every break they can get right now, but I just think that with the chaos that's going to break out in front, I really think that they're in a real good position to maybe make a playoff spot this year, which I would have never thought 3 weeks ago.
Yep.
But man, oh man, Nebraska, geez. I don't know if you saw any of this game, but you were talking about the uniform matchup last week. It looked like an inter-squad scrimmage. No one wore special uniforms.
No, and Wisconsin didn't even try the red helmet.
Nope, it was Wisconsin with the red jerseys and the white pants versus Nebraska.
Oh yeah, I see it
with the white and white. And if you were 10 feet away and couldn't see the logos on the helmets, you would have had no idea which team was which.
Well, God, okay. So let's break this down really quick. We'll start with the pants. They're both white pants.
Yeah.
They both have 2 red stripes down the leg. One has an N, one has a W.
Uh-huh.
Let's go to the jerseys. They're both red and white, and they have the 2 stripes on the shoulders, or on the where the TV numbers are. The Nebraska, they have that patch on the front, so slightly different. But then you go to the helmet, and it's a white helmet with a single letter on the side. Now, Wisconsin has 2 red stripes. Nebraska only has 1. But who's going to know that?
Right.
Who's going to know that?
Outside of people like us? Yeah, exactly. I'm just saying that if you were, say, in the second deck, 3 rows up in the second deck, and you didn't know who was who, you would have no idea. They look so much alike. Once you get far enough away where you can't really make out the logos, forget it. They looked exactly alike. It was crazy.
Like, Nebraska should wear, because they have the black shirts.
Right.
They should wear black uniforms for this game. Or, if there was ever a time where I would advocate alternate jerseys, it's for a game like that.
Exactly. And I wanted. Oh, go ahead.
Well, it's like the concept in soccer, where you have your regular jersey, and sometimes you have a road jersey, but you also, on special occasions, need to bust out the clash kit, which is extremely different than the other two, because if there's even the slight chance where you could be mistaken, you make it fairly obvious who you are versus who the other team is.
Right.
Now, I know that would give some, and the other thing about these 2 uniforms, they're both Adidas.
Exactly.
That makes it better.
Yeah.
But it's that might give Nike the license to, you need something that you can tell yourself apart? Here's our new Volt jersey. Here's our new neon pink. And maybe that would be bad for college football, but it's not like we can get any lower when it comes to college football uniforms at this point.
Right. Well, I think last year Nebraska wore these crazy alternates in this game with the big. They were really ugly, but there was no question that you knew who was who.
Right.
But looking at a picture right now, okay, there are things on here that, okay, yes, they both had the 2 shoulder stripes. We would know because Nebraska's stripes are thicker and further apart. But again, a person that doesn't follow this kind of stuff would have no clue.
They would never see that.
The pants stripes look almost exactly alike. And it was funny to me because I thought it's like an inter-squad scrimmage. They're just so completely almost identical in the way they look. It was just funny to me.
Could you imagine being a ref in this game? Penalty number 25, white. No, that was on him. Oh, was it? Oh, well, oops.
Yeah.
Anyway. But yeah, Nebraska finally loses like we all thought they should, and Wisconsin with a big win on the back of Melvin Gordon.
We'll move to number 17. Oh, go ahead.
Number 17, LSU. Well, they've had some good games. They've also had some pretty bad games. This is one of the bad ones. As Arkansas, in kind of a symbolic win, they beat number 17 LSU by 17 points, 17-0. To end their SEC losing streak at 17. You can't write that sort of thing.
Isn't Arkansas...
You beat the 17th ranked team in the country, 17-0, to end a 17-game losing streak.
Yeah. That's where if you're ever looking for proof of the football gods, you only need to look right there. But isn't Arkansas kind of the LA... I'm already ahead of myself, too. The St. Louis Rams of the SEC, kind of, this year?
Yeah, I mean they're
playing people tough.
Teams tight.
Yeah, But yeah, LSU, man, there's a team, though, that, again, if they stay at 2 losses, they might be able to climb their way back into the thick of things, but not now. Now, that's definitely an elimination game. They are done, without question.
Yeah, and, they were 7-3 before, so they could have stayed in it, I guess.
Okay, that was their 4th loss. Okay, never mind. They were done last week then. Okay, never mind.
Yeah, well, because remember, they were tight with Alabama. If they could have beaten Alabama last week,
right,
then that would have been a completely different story. Then they'd be at 7. Remember we talked about it. If LSU had beaten Alabama, there was the potential for a 5-way tie.
Exactly.
In the ACC West.
Right. Exactly.
But that's not going to happen. It's definitely not going to happen now with a 17-0 loss to Arkansas or Kansas.
Yeah, and they got shut out too, which is even wow.
We'll go to number 18, and oh, how the mighty have fallen. Notre Dame, the Fighting Irish. They looked like they were starting off with a good game. They started out 20-9. Way to go, Notre Dame. You're responding. And then Northwestern started to come back, and Everett Golson did what Everett Golson does and gave him a couple turnovers.
Sure.
And Northwestern ties the game late, and they go into overtime in South Bend, and Notre Dame had a pathetic first series of the overtime. Northwestern gets the ball, and all you have to do is make the field goal, kick it right down the middle, and they knock off the Fighting Irish 43-40 in South Bend. Notre Dame, they dropped from 10-18. Notre Dame has to drop completely out of the rankings this week, right?
If not drop out completely, at least tumble down to the 24-25 range for sure. But they're pretty much exactly what we thought they were going to be. They were a 3-4 loss team coming into the season. That's what they're going to end up with. I just want to say this. I am really glad that Ohio State doesn't play Northwestern this year.
Really?
Yeah, they beat them last year. Northwestern beat Ohio State. I think it was last year or the year before. But they run that spread offense they run is just tough, man. And they put together a track meet, and you better be able to hang with them or, well, you saw what happened to Notre Dame.
I really love those Northwestern jerseys, by the way.
Do you?
With the stripe across the chest?
Yeah, I don't mind them. I didn't like them at first when they first came out, but I kind of like them now, yeah.
Yeah, it's a unique look, and
absolutely
they rock it well.
And just thank God the Buckeyes don't play them this year. That's what I have to say about the Wildcats.
We'll move on back to the ACC. A big game in the SEC or ACC, excuse me. As number 19 Clemson went to Atlanta, took on number 22 Georgia Tech, and wasn't really ever a contest. Georgia Tech and that triple option, running and passing, all over the Clemson Tigers with a 28-6 win. Georgia Tech, they're in line to play in the ACC title game.
I think Georgia Tech's capable of beating Florida State. I do.
They're an interesting team. They're very because of the way they play, and they were kind of lurking in the shadows for a while. They were one of the last undefeated teams there for a while, and then they lost a tight one. But they're a very interesting prospect when it comes to maybe knocking off Florida State for sure.
That triple option, if you haven't seen it, it's tough to play against because usually, at most, you're going to see it once a year. At most, and it's usually when you play a service academy or some small team that doesn't have the personnel to run a bitter type offense. But Tech's got the players. I think they get enough talent there where they can run that thing pretty effectively. I would love to see Georgia Tech and Florida State in the ACC title game. That would be great.
It would be fun.
Yeah.
But speaking of the ACC, the dream dies, Greg.
Yeah, it sure did.
Duke Blue Devils, number 21 in the country. They were just vaulting towards another 10-win season, going towards the ACC title game. They were going to knock off Florida State. Not so much. They lose at home, 17-16 to Virginia Tech, making that loss against the Buckeyes not as bad.
I was just going to say, and the things you thought you would never hear, Department, a Duke Blue Devil loss helped the Ohio State Buckeyes.
Yeah, right.
That just doesn't happen every day.
They could still make it up to the 10-win threshold this year. And
do they have any shot at still making the ACC title game?
They're at 4-2. Georgia Tech's at 6-2. I think Georgia Tech only has to play Georgia left.
Georgia Tech has Georgia. That's it. That's all they have left this season.
Right. So their ACC schedule's done. Same with Clemson. They're 6-2.
The Blue Devils have North Carolina and Wake Forest left.
They can easily win those two games.
Yeah.
Did they beat Georgia Tech earlier this year?
Let me see here. Yes, they did. They beat Georgia Tech 31-25.
Are they in the same division?
They are in the same division with Georgia Tech. So they have the tiebreaker if they win out, and because Georgia Tech has no ACC games left. So if the Blue Devils win out, they will take the Coastal Division in the ACC over Georgia Tech.
Everything to play for.
Everything to play for. The dream's still alive, sort of.
Yeah.
Sort of.
Sort of.
Honestly, I'd rather see. I think Tech's got a better chance of beating Florida State. So
yeah, I want Duke to get to 10 wins though.
Yeah, so would I. I think they'll get to the 10 wins, and if they do, then they win the ACC Coastal, I believe. We'll see.
It'll be interesting down the stretch. Missouri, they actually are leading Georgia in the SEC East.
I was just going to say they're still alive in the SEC East. So
so Missouri's 8-2, 5-1 in the SEC. Georgia is 8-2 and 6-2 in the SEC. But Georgia was 15 and Missouri was unranked?
Yeah.
I know Missouri lost to Indiana this year. But like we've mentioned, with all these teams, everybody has their one bad loss.
Right.
I don't know how Missouri hasn't been ranked.
Yeah, because they actually, I'm sure they'll get in this week because.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
But, yeah, I mean, they're 8-2. How are they not ranked? That's crazy.
An SEC team's 8-2 and unranked.
And leading their division in the SEC and they're unranked.
And leading the division.
That's weird. That is really weird.
Before we close out the college, though, when the rankings come out tonight, who do you think are your top 4 and then maybe your top 6?
All right, let me take a look here real quick. Okay. Alabama, Oregon. I know that much.
I think they'll do Oregon 1, Alabama 2, Florida State 3, Mississippi State 4, then TCU 5. It should be Baylor 6, and then Ohio State 7.
And
that's what it should be. But they might have Ohio State. Maybe they jump Ohio State up to 5 because they did beat a ranked team on the road.
Yeah, but you still got that.
TCU lost tight to Kansas, and Baylor didn't play.
Okay, I will say this: if there was going to be a shocker in the top 4, it would be Ohio State moving into it. I don't see it happening. I don't see it happening, but I do think that they move Florida State back to number 1 just because they're undefeated.
I mean, they already moved down Florida State to number 3.
This is true.
When Mississippi State was undefeated and Oregon had 1 loss. And because of how they played again, I wouldn't be surprised if they said, no, screw you.
Yeah,
You're not the number 1 team in the country. You don't get to be the number 1 team in the country just by being undefeated in the reigning national champ.
And
That's not how this playoff is supposed to work anymore.
And you know what? These people actually seem to be paying attention to their rankings. So I'm going to retract that. I'm going to put I think Alabama moves to number 1. All right.
You do.
I think Oregon goes 2. You still got to leave Florida State in there at some point, so they're going to be 3, and it's going to be between. I still think Mississippi State still hangs on to that number 4 spot. Then you put TCU, Baylor. No, it should be Baylor, TCU, Ohio State, but it's not going to be. But my top 4, I'm going to go Alabama, Oregon, Florida State, Mississippi State.
And like you said, they take into account how you won these games.
Exactly.
They're watching. So it's if you're struggling to win, you're going to get a couple points knocking down. But if you fought back in a tight game and a loss like Mississippi State did, you're not going to fall as far. It's the same thing that happened to Auburn.
Right.
I guess that's going to do it.
All right.
Our football coverage this week, and follow basically a network.
Basically a podcast network. Yeah.
Yeah, we have one show that refuses to go with the trend and has decided to name themselves something else because maybe they think there's something special. I don't know. Classic Rockcast.
Well, I've actually seriously considered changing it to basically a classic rock podcast. If I'm going to be on the network, I got to go with it, right?
You could call it Bars, basically a rock show.
I will say this though, thanks to the guy I had on, Mitch LaFon, that my little classic rockcast is number 2 this week, and the basically a podcast network's downloads. Now, granted, the new football show, basically a sports show, but the new football show hasn't come out yet, so that's going to change shortly. But right now, it's number 2. It's a little podcast that could right now.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we will talk to you guys on Thursday with basically a sports show. Follow all of our things, and we'll see you next week. Enjoy the football.